There's some new changes and added functionality to the barricade this season, so I decided to test it out with a few exotics and conditions to see what the new and improved barricade can accomplish. So that we're all on the same page, let's quickly look at the changes on paper, and then we'll see how it translates to gameplay. These changes affect both towering and the rally barricade. Barricades now taunt enemies, causing foes in front of it to inexplicably feel the need to shoot the barricade rather than the person behind it. Important to note that someone must be behind the barricade in order for the taunt to stay active. The barricade alone will not taunt enemies. We'll talk more about that later. The other big changes are that the barricade now takes less damage from PvE enemies that aren't bosses, and gives extra splash damage resistance for players behind the barricade. Finally, it also gives the Titan a bit of damage resist while casting the barricade. So to start things off, let's try out the taunt feature, as that's definitely the most exciting part. Slap down the barricade and watch as enemies now shoot the center of the barricade rather than the face of the one standing behind it. However, it's not foolproof, and the enemies are only enticed to shoot the barricade, not commanded. You'll notice that some enemies can be a bit stubborn and might still target you. In fact, sometimes you'll notice every enemy can be stubborn. It seems that where you stand behind the barricade makes a pretty big impact, such as too far behind the barricade or too far to the side of it. Thankfully though, the taunt isn't just when the barricade is deployed. If the opposition loses interest in the barricade, you can simply shimmy back to the center, and the heat will often transfer from you back to the barricade. Range also doesn't seem to be a factor either. Snipers and shotgunners alike will find beef with the barricade and will fire upon it no matter how far they are from you. Lower tiered enemies are more likely to target the barricade, but higher tiered enemies aren't exactly immune to its taunt effects. I mean, just look at Carl here. He can't get enough of this thing. Exotics also play a big part in the use of the barricade, and the ones I wanted to try were Arbor Warden and Titans. I really wish it was the case, but unfortunately Arbor Warden's thrown barricade does not immediately taunt enemies, instead maintaining the requirement of the player presence behind the barricade. That flies in the face of the entire point of Arbor Warden, so that sucks, I guess. What's the point of this exotic? Titans is a bit better, working with the new barricade changes as intended, though again, it kinda goes against the whole point of Titans, just a bit. The extra barricade durability works wonders with Titans. The barricade doesn't even budge against multiple nightmare enemies. The only problem here is the same problem I was having last time I used Titans, and that's of course the barricade's lifetime. It simply doesn't last long enough. It's nice that it doesn't get destroyed, and if you really want to use Titans, I think you could make something work, but personally this just isn't enough for me to use Titans, especially when the rally barricade provides similar shooting advantages, and now with the taunt, similar protection. Other benefits towards the barricade include a splash damage resist while you're behind the barricade. It was 20% before, but now it's 60%, which is quite a bit. Looking at these little missiles good old Carl launches, you can see a comparison between being behind a barricade and not. The difference is pretty noticeable and could come in handy quite often. Finally, the barricade also gives damage resist while casting, which again can come in very handy in certain situations. I myself am excited to try this with Lorelei, deploying a more aggressive sunspot without as much a threat towards your health pool. As far as which barricade to use, it's mostly personal preference. Mostly. The towering barricade does its best to taunt stuff, and in that regard, it's as good as it was. It's obviously going to give you the most coverage, but now that enemies are often targeting the barricade as opposed to the player behind it, that coverage might not be needed. It's still good. I mean, it's a giant wall that enemies can't shoot through. It's great for blocking off an area. All this has helped the All this has helped the rally barricade far more than the towering one. Because the enemies, again, are shooting the barricade rather than the player, you can stand behind the rally barricade and shoot over it in relative safety. So, to summarize, yes, the Titan barricade now does a much better job at doing, well, its job. It gives a noticeable damage resist modifier while deploying it, and a splash damage resist for those behind it. It also attracts the attention of foes in front of it, mostly successfully, though there are occasional stubborn enemies who still decide to target the players. After actually playing with the changes for a bit, these buffs are definitely noticeable, and as a Titan main, I do feel much more confident in my Barricade's ability to block damage and give me cover when I need it. It's unfortunate that some of the Barricade-focused exotics like Arbor Warden and Titans don't really see a lot of benefit from these changes, but I would say on the whole that this was a really solid first pass at giving the Titan a bit more team play and role identity. If you've used the Barricade recently, let me know how you think the changes have landed. Do you think the Barricade does a better job of giving the team some cover, or have you even noticed the changes at all? Let me know down in the comments. Until next time.